Hello, every now and again I discuss offence that I've written a court report about um, from notes that I've kept. I change all the details. I give the person another name. I change dates, the addresses, all that. So I anonymise it really. But I kind of want to, I'm quite eager to discuss these cases because I think it puts over uh, the sort of things that can go on, the realities of crime. Um, do please have a look at my YouTube channel, and there's playlists. But I've got a playlist with about at least 40 of these cases, so anybody who's interested. But they're based on real stories and real events that happen, and you get real dilemmas. So today's dilemma really is where somebody who's of low risk to the public, no, not likely to harm anybody physically or mentally, but who has defrauded benefits quite a lot. Quite an elderly person that's not particularly well, not particularly good at managing money, has a slight learning disability, but because the benefit fraud's gone on for years, it amounts to £66,000. And anybody fiddling that kind of money normally automatically goes to jail. But you kind of think, well, should this person really be going to jail? Are they going to be a risk to the public? No. Are they a risk of harming the public? No. The only reason to bang them away is to make an example of them and to make sure other people don't commit frauds. But there are concerns. I've got concern was, why wasn't this offence picked up really straight away? What went on, where systems are a bit lax? So I'm going to discuss that. Also, do we really need to make an example of him? And if he is sent away to jail, this elderly person, he's going to probably come out worse, and statistics have shown that people who do get sentenced to imprisonment do seem to get damaged in some way and seem to be a much higher risk of reoffending if they're sent to prison. And we've got a horrendous reoffending rate. I think we've got one of the highest reoffending rates in Europe. Shocking. And it's largely to do, apparently, that we're obsessed with sending people to prison. Okay. I've been reading a book. I'm going to quickly mention it now. It's called Time After Time by Chris Atkins. But anybody interested in the criminal justice system and where we're going wrong, do have a look at it. Sad to say that Chris Atkins is very, very, what's the word I could say, quite points the finger at probation and says that probation is failing to rehabilitate offenders big time, that probation aren't doing their job in rehabilitating people. What I will say is that trying to rehabilitate people coming out of prison is a very hard job. Probation don't have any magic answers, but the sort of thing that people coming out of prison need is somewhere to live, and often probation can't help find somewhere to live. Often people need a job, but probation can't always help with that. And I think perhaps probation have lost their way a bit and should be focusing much more on rehabilitating people, but particularly those early stages, early doors of their crimes, they need much more effort. I think coming out of jail is almost too late, really, and short prison sentences, like Chris Atkins says, don't work, and people are much more likely to reoffend than having probation, community sentence. So, right, I'm going to talk about this offence. I've changed the offender's name to Mr. Townsend, and it dates from the 1990s. I've changed the dates, but he started offending, committing this benefit fraud offence in 1992, and he was caught in the year 2000. So, that's about 8 years and over that period, he falsely claimed £66,000, which is considerable, isn't it? So to prepare the report, I looked through all the prosecution papers, the evidence, the witness statements. I checked that Mr. Townsend had no previous convictions. I held 2 interviews with Mr. Townsend, and I also met his sister. I had a telephone conversation with his wife. I undertook a screening test on his literacy skills, and I had sight of a letter from his doctor, his GP, confirming that he has heart trouble, and I had sight of documents that confirmed his income and some of his expenditure, etc. So what happened was he falsely declared that both he and his wife were not working, when in fact his wife was indeed working. His wife was earning approximately £150 per week from a job as a carer, and she was paid properly through the system. And over the whole period, the total sum falsely claimed amounts to some £66,000. So given a substantial sum right at the outset, this is a serious case, and it seems likely that the court will be considering imposing a custodial sentence. Given this, it normally does. So Mr. Townsend seems unsure and confused over the origins of the offence, but maybe he's trying to mitigate and minimise his actions. But he says he knew what he was doing was wrong. He said he felt pressurised into doing the offence because of his family needs. He said they were short of money. And he said they began to encounter financial problems after he'd given up work because of his health. He said all he did was he simply put a tick in the wrong box, but he took all the documents requested of him to the benefits agencies and showed them, including, he says, his wife's earnings, but he said they never picked up on that, which I find very peculiar. And he kind of said, oh, he was confused at first, but he knew he'd made a mistake, but nobody seemed to spot it. And maybe he was hoping that nobody would spot this mistake. I think at first he didn't realise the seriousness of the offence, but later he said he felt trapped by it, and that he feared that the housing might evict him from their home as a means of repaying the debt. And he says with hindsight, he now deeply regrets his actions. Well, he would do, wouldn't he? He now appreciates that if he had properly declared it, he would have been entitled to about half the sum, given his circumstances, if he'd properly declared his wife's income. Now, what I don't understand is, even back in the 1990s, the benefits agencies run a computer program and they spot people's national insurance numbers. So if somebody's making national insurance contributions, they can't be getting benefit. Simple as that, and it's simple to run. So I don't know how and why Mr. Townsend got round this check system that's normally run by the benefits agencies, and they catch people quite quickly and stop them, and it's like a deterrent, really, that you can't do that. And I'm surprised that he managed to do that for such a long time without being detected. And it's a simple run, really, of checking payments against a national insurance number and money going out against that money insurance number. The computers they run a check on the computers, and it won't. Now, I did have a look at his income and expenditure. Throughout the period, he says he never had any holidays abroad or anything like that. He says all the money went on ordinary living expenses. However, when I did look a bit more closely, it was apparent that he had been betting some amounts of money which worried me, on horse racing, which I don't think is appropriate. And he told me on average he was spending about £12 a week, possibly £20 a week on betting, which is quite a lot of money actually when you mounts up. And his wife was keeping the money separate and going to bingo, so occasionally time to time. So again, these are non-essential and possibly addictive behaviours, aren't they? Gambling. It would appear that somebody did a anonymous tip-off, and that's how they got caught out. Now, talking about his childhood, when he was young, he was evacuated during the war. He was temporarily placed in foster care and in care when he contracted meningitis. He experienced learning difficulties at school. His literacy and numeracy tests that probation undertakes showed that he does have problems, some difficulties in that area. And it took him quite a long time to complete the test. After leaving foster care, he grew up in a nice county town, but he said his family were poor. His father was partially sighted and his mother suffered with health, and neither were able to work. He found school after leaving. He found work after leaving school at 14, and he's been actively employed throughout his adult life. But he was forced to give up work due to ill health in 1993. Most of his jobs have involved manual and factory work. For a substantial period, he was engaged as assembly and electrical machinery for various firms. And he worked doing that for about 23 years. Although he was entitled to a company pension, he left the company pension scheme after being missold a pension, private pension. He married in 1966, and he and his wife have 4 children, aged 37, 35, 34 and 30 years old. And they now have 4 grandchildren. He's experienced 4 heart attacks since 1990 and has been prescribed a range of drugs to stabilise his condition. Heart problems appear to run in the family. His brother and sister died of heart attacks, aged 64 and 55 respectively. One of his brothers has undergone heart bypass operation, and one of his sisters has a pacemaker. He appears to have a supportive family. His wife advised me that she has taken over the main responsibility of managing the household expenditure since the incident. He enjoys doing a bit of gardening, but he does it lightly and carefully. And that's about it, really. I'll talk about his income, which is quite low. He's quite cooperative. So I think he's a person, general little knowledge about the criminal justice system, and I actually think that his contact so far has had quite an impact on him and frightened him. Custody seems likely, but I'm really worried about his health. He's quite a vulnerable person. He has a learning disability. He could be the sort of person that could be subjected to bullying, and you know, he's got poor health. So if they want to consider community sentence appropriate, he's ruled out of doing community service work, unpaid work in the community, because his doctor has declared him as unfit to work. He is of below average intelligence. He doesn't pose a particular threat to society. If the court regard it as quite exceptional in this case, they could impose what's known as a suspended supervision order, where suspended sentence supervision order, where it could be useful, I think, for him to have supervision on managing his money better, monitoring his future behaviour, making sure that he stops doing any gambling altogether, work on and improving his skills, getting him to take up new purposeful activities, getting involved with local charity that helps and assists the care of the elderly in the local community, and overseeing his repayments back, repaying the debt he owns. So I think that's quite a good idea, and if he reoffends in any way, because it's a suspended sentence, he would be going to jail. So that's it basically, and thanks for looking in. Do write in with your comments, and please do look out for my other YouTubes about other cases. There's look at the page. My playlist is called Probation Case Discussion, and there's a huge variety of cases there that are quite interesting. Anyway, all the very best now. Cheers. Bye bye.